And welcome back, our dear viewers. As we have promised at the beginning of the show, that we are going to shed light about the Egyptian-Indian relations, which are of great strength indeed throughout history. To shed more light about that, we are very much delighted to be joined here in the studio by His Excellency Ambassador Ajit Gupte, the Ambassador of India in Cairo. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, can you shed light about the historical relations between Egypt and India?
Certainly. Egypt and India were two of the most ancient civilizations in the world, and our contacts go back thousands of years ago. In fact, I have heard that some of the mummies were wrapped with oils which came from India.
Yes.
And the written evidence is when one of our great emperors in the 2nd century BC, Ashoka, he wrote in his edicts about letters that he exchanged with Ptolemy II.
Yeah.
So our trading contacts have continued through the centuries, and Indian culture has also contributed to Egypt. For example, the koshiyari, which is a favorite dish, is supposed to have come from India.
Yes.
Similarly, mangoes, which are a very popular fruit in Egypt, are also supposed to have been brought by Indian traders.
Yes.
But in the last century, we had contacts between Mahatma Gandhi and Saad Zaghloul. Gandhi ji had actually passed through the Suez Canal on his way to the Round Table Conference in 1931. Yeah. And there was a special friendship between President Nasser and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, which led to the foundation of the non-aligned movement. And in fact, India and Egypt signed a friendship treaty in 1955. So since then, the contacts have continued, and there has been regular exchange of high-level visits.
Yes, sir. Sir, recently Egypt witnessed the visit by the defense minister and the foreign minister of India to Egypt. How do you see the significance and importance of these very important visit and the importance of cooperation on the defense and foreign affairs levels?
Right. Well, as I said, we have had regular ministerial visits. Our external affairs minister had visited Egypt in 2015, and your foreign minister had visited India in 2018. Now, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, there was a gap in between, because for a couple of years there were hardly any visits anywhere in the world. All the interaction was taking place either on the phone,
or video conferences.
Or video conferences. But we have been laying the groundwork for improved relations. I am glad to inform you, since you asked about defense, that about 15 defense delegations from India have visited Egypt since I came. And last year, in fact, our Chief of Air Staff visited Egypt in November and December. We also held, for the first time ever, joint exercises between the fighter aircrafts of India and Egypt last year in November.
Yes.
We had a number of Indian companies which took part in your EDEX in December. And this year, I am happy to inform you that in June, for the first time again, Indian fighter aircraft and some of our top fighter pilots took part in the tactical leadership program. They were here in Egypt for a month. Now, similarly, we've had a number of naval ship visits. We've had about 8 naval ships which have visited Egypt, taken part in exercises. And this helps to improve the interoperability between the Indian and the Egyptian Navy. Now, the culmination of all this interaction was when our defense minister visited in September, and during the visit an MOU on defense cooperation was signed. And our defense minister, who is among the most senior ministers in India, he also called on President Sisi, and generally the outcome of the visit will help further strengthen defense cooperation.
Indeed. Also, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had extended the invitation to President Sisi to attend the celebration of India's Republic Day, which will take place next year, as a chief guest. How this is reflecting the deep friendship and ties between both countries, sir?
Yes. Well, let me tell you a little bit first about the Republic Day. India celebrates the occasion of it becoming a republic on the 26th of January every year, while events are organized throughout the country, the main event is in New Delhi,
Yes.
where in the boulevard called Rajpath, there is a parade. It is a parade showcasing India's defense equipment, tanks, artillery guns, armored carriers, radar, etc.
Yes.
But there is also a marching by different units of the Indian Army, the paramilitary, and also some schools. And then we also have an air show. We also have some cultural program.
Yes.
And every year since 1950, we invite a chief guest. And the chief guest is the head of state or head of government of a country with whom we have friendly relations, with whom we would like to strengthen ties. And this is the first time ever that Egypt's president will be present as the chief guest. So it is a very special privilege that India extends, and it's a very special occasion. And you will find that between now and the Republic Day, there will be enormous publicity in India. People will be writing about India-Egypt relations, how they are growing, how they are expanding. And during the visit itself, there will be tremendous focus
Yes.
all over India on Egypt. And this will take our relationship to a higher level.
Yes. Sir, we are talking here about the depths and the strengths of both ties here between Egypt and India. If we are shedding light here about the level of economic cooperation between both countries, how do you see the level of cooperation and how we can increase the trade exchange and economic cooperation between both Egypt and India?
Well, Egypt has traditionally been one of India's most important trading partners in Africa. And although the trade was about 4.5 billion in 1920 and in the years before that, I am happy to inform you that last year, that is in 2021-22, there was a very high growth of 75%. And the trade reached a record high of $7.26 billion. Last year, and the good news is that the trade is evenly matched. Egypt's exports are about the same as India's exports, and in fact India is the third most important export destination for Egypt, which is something which is very interesting. So trade this year is continuing to grow, although a little bit slowly because of the global trends and the impact of the Ukraine crisis. But another very important aspect is the investments from India, and Indian companies have over the last 2 to 3 decades invested more than $3.2 billion in Egypt. Most of the investments are in manufacturing, the manufacturing of chemicals, petrochemicals, packaging materials, paints, PVC, caustic soda. And I am happy to inform you that the Indian companies are contributing to about exports of 1.5 to 2 billion US dollars from Egypt to other countries, to Europe, America, etc. So in my view, the Indian investments are very valuable because they are in manufacturing, they help to modernize Egypt, they help in the industrialization of Egypt.
Yes. Do you believe here that the level of investment, the Indian investment in Egypt is quite satisfying, or a lot more could be still done concerning the Indian investment in Egypt?
Well, certainly as the Indian economy continues to grow and Indian companies increasingly look at opportunities overseas, there is much more scope for attracting Indian investment. India is already the 5th largest economy in the world with a GDP of US dollars 3.2 trillion last year. But some very encouraging trends are that Indian companies have shown a lot of interest in green hydrogen. And I am delighted to convey that 2 of our very big companies, Renew Power and Acme Group, have signed MOUs in the last few months, totaling, promising an investment of 8 billion and 6 billion. That is a total of $14 billion of investments in Egypt to use renewable energy to make green hydrogen. And this will by far be, the largest Indian investments in Egypt.
Since, sir, you have raised this issue of the green energy, And indeed, we have been witnessing the COP27, and the world is moving towards more of a green economy. To what extent we could witness more cooperation between both Egypt and India concerning these domains as well?
Well, as I said, green hydrogen is an area where Indian companies are stepping into
Yes,
Egypt,
yes.
and these are some very significant
Indeed.
investments. There is also interest by one or two more companies. So, if these investments successfully materialize, they would add a new dimension to our commercial and trade relations. But Indian companies have also executed 300 megawatts of solar projects in the Benban area.
Yes.
And there are a lot of areas where we can contribute, where Egypt can also learn from us, because we have really made a lot of progress in developing new concepts like rooftop solar, that is on each house installing
Yes.
solar panels, and that is growing very rapidly in India. And we have also now in the last 1 year started doing a lot of floating solar, that is on our lakes we install solar panels. So that also helps to reduce the evaporation. We also welcome Egypt joining the International Solar Alliance. So there are a lot of areas, capacity building, etc. We are also beginning to manufacture solar panels. We also manufacture a lot of wind turbines. So there is a lot of scope for further cooperation between India and Egypt in this
Indeed.
sector.
Sir, Egypt has received an invitation for the G20 Summit organized by India. Can you shed more light on that?
Right. Well, India has taken over the presidency of the G20 from the 1st of December 2022, and we will be holding this for 1 year. There will be a G20 summit held in New Delhi in September. But in addition, we will be organizing more than 150 to 200 events between now and next year. These will be working groups on finance, economy, business, etc. And we look forward to welcoming participation from Egypt. Now, as the president of the G20, it is our prerogative to invite certain guest countries. So, in addition to the G20, whose membership is fixed, we have invited 9 other countries, and I am again very happy to say that Egypt is one of those countries.
Yes.
And this shows that India's desire to strengthen relations with Egypt. We recognize that Egypt plays a very important role in maintaining peace and stability in the region, that it is at the crossroads of Africa and the Middle East, that it is a bastion of stability, that its economy continues to grow, and keeping in mind our friendly historical relations, the 2 gestures made by India of inviting Egypt for the G20 as a guest country, and our very special invitation to Honorable President Sisi to be the chief guest of the Republic Day shows India's earnest desire to strengthen bilateral relations and take them to a new level.
Yes. Mr. Ambassador, also the Indians are taking the responsibility of the G20 during a very challenging time. Because of the repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the tense situation because of the Ukrainian-Russian war. So what are the most important and most challenging files here that India would be tackling as the president of the G20 summit?
Right. So you see, the world is certainly going through very challenging times, as you mentioned, because of various crises, whether it is climate change or COVID or the Ukraine crisis and the economic fallout. What we are trying to do as the president of the G20 is to try and bring about a more peaceful and more equitable world. The world has become polarized between the north and the south, and between the west and the east. And as our Honorable Prime Minister mentioned, our theme for the G20 will be one world, one family and one future.
Yes.
So we are against this divisions, that this is the north, this is the south.
Yes.
We would like the countries to look at the global problems together. And we are also going to make a special effort so that the developing countries, the countries of the south as they say, have a voice, so that it doesn't just become, because G20 is mainly the more advanced economy, the developed countries and the larger economies. so that it should not become a platform only for the rich countries and the industrialized countries to talk about their issues. So we would like to play a role in reducing the differences between the countries and try to encourage all countries to adopt common positions. And please note that India, as a leader of the non-aligned countries
Yes.
for many decades,
Yes.
we are one country whom everybody talks to. So
Yes.
even in the Ukraine crisis, everybody talks to us.
Yes, indeed.
The Russians talk to us, Ukraine talks to us, the Western countries talk to us.
So, sir, how can we find here a way in order to find a real reform to the economic system, as most of the countries nowadays, due to the challenges that we have mentioned after the pandemic and the Ukrainian-Russian crisis, are suffering from inflation and from many economic hardships. So how can the G20 during this round tackle the issues in order to try to minimize the economic and financial losses for most of the nations in the world due to these challenges and these crises as well?
Well, firstly, on an individual level, India has tried to contribute to mitigating the challenges of the COVID pandemic and food insecurity. We were one of the very few countries who went out of the way to provide a lot of medicines and vaccines. In fact, while many of the richer countries were amassing vaccines, some of the countries had ordered 5-6 times more than their population. India gave and distributed vaccines to more than 180 countries. We sent some vaccines to Egypt also. Now, also we are a very large producer of food grains, vegetables and fruits. We are among the second largest producer in the world, and we are providing a lot of food to developing countries. But the G20 will have to work together. It has to try and reduce tensions, because the Ukraine crisis has certainly had a very big impact on food security, energy security, etc.
Yes. So also Africa is one of the main topics, and the cooperation and the integration of Africa to the world economy is an important issue that would be tackled as well as a main topic in the G20. So the importance of the African continent and the challenges that the African continent is facing on the economic level as well. How do you see that as a topic which is of great importance to the coming round of the G20 as well?
So you see, we have been highlighting that the developing countries are facing a very adverse impact due to the Ukraine crisis.
Yes.
That very large numbers of people are facing starvation, there is a lack of food, energy prices have gone up, people's incomes have eroded significantly, and that the pain being felt by developing countries is much, much worse than, say, the developed countries.
Yes.
So we are also urging that all sides in the Ukraine conflict, that they must come and there should be some peaceful resolution. In fact, our Prime Minister had said recently that this is not an era for war.
Yes.
This is not a time for war.
Indeed, indeed.
Now,
yes, sir. Yes, please go ahead.
So I think what we will try and do is try and encourage countries to focus more on Africa. We ourselves have contributed significantly to Africa's development.
Yes.
We have invested about $75 billion. Indian companies have invested in Africa. We also have a concessional loan program where we have given concessional loans of $12 billion to Africa. And in many countries in Africa, we have done very important projects which contribute significantly to the well-being of these countries. Just for example, we have given a loan of $1 billion to Tanzania, and we have finished water filtration, water supply projects worth about $350 million in Tanzania. Just one example.
Yes, it's very important indeed, and very promising as well. Sir, on the political level here, the cooperation between Egypt and India, how do you see the most important files of mutual concern for both countries?
Well, we have excellent cooperation in many multilateral forums.
Yes.
And both countries have a similar worldview on many issues. We I think both countries contribute to ensuring peace, stability in the region. We also have taken a firm stand against fighting terrorism
Indeed.
and eliminating terrorism in all forms. We really don't have any contentious issues between India and Egypt.
Yes, of course.
So basically, all this interaction will help
Yes.
to further expand the areas of cooperation. And I would just like to mention two or
Yes.
three, this green hydrogen which I mentioned, that is a new
Indeed.
area.
Yes.
And if these investments, I am confident that they will materialize, that will add a very big dimension. Similarly, we have just had made some progress in education and IT. The first Indian IT company, Tech Mahindra, is setting up operations from this month in
Yes.
Egypt, and they will be hiring 1,000 IT professionals, and this will help contribute to the Egyptian economy. Similarly, just a few months ago, we have done a tie-up in the educational sector
Yes.
between an Indian university and an Egyptian university.
Yes.
So these are new areas of
Of
cooperation.
cooperation, very important areas indeed. And finally, sir, the cultural cooperation here between India and Egypt, and we have many similarities here in our cultural history and heritage. So how do you see here the cultural cooperation between both countries, as the Egyptians now are more common with the meditation, with the yoga practices? So how do you see the cooperation here between both countries on that level?
Well, I must say that one of the fascinating aspects of being in
Yes.
Egypt is how deeply impacted and interested Egyptians are in Indian culture.
Indeed.
In fact, whether it is young people or middle-aged or old people, they all
Yes.
seem to have been brought up on Bollywood films, and names like Amitabh Bachchan, Shah Rukh Khan are
Yes.
known to everybody.
Yes.
And this is something very, very interesting. And I think the Egyptians find the Indian values, close family ties, respect for the elders,
Yes.
they associate more with closely with these values,
Yeah.
and that is why they find the Indian movies close to their heart.
Yes.
But they also like Indian music, Indian dance, and we have organized a number of large cultural activities over the last year.
Yes.
Once the threat of the COVID has receded, we have a large cultural center here. And you very rightly said that yoga, meditation are becoming more and more popular.
Yes.
And really in today's world where there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of
Indeed.
uncertainty,
Yes.
you need to do more of this yoga and meditation. And I believe a lot of Egyptians are going to India
Yes.
to learn yoga, and many of them are starting institutes here.
Yes, indeed. Ambassador Ajit Gupte, Ambassador of India to Egypt, thank you so much for being our guest today. It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. And our dear viewers, with that we come to the end of this section in our program today, and we'll go to a short break, and after that we'll be back with my dear colleague Amal Mukhtar. So stay tuned.